June is here with us.
You want to say hello to people at the church?
Hello to people at Longmont Church.
Yeah, this is June Thomas, 100 and a half or a little more than that years old, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Reverend Sarah's asked you a couple of questions. So the first one is, what are your favorite moments that you remember at Longmont UCC?
It must be the singing in the choir. I always loved that so much.
Was there any particular choir director or piece of music or any particular concert or anything that you remember that you liked?
I don't think so.
No. So another question that Sarah had was, were there moments when you thought the church was courageous? And when we talked earlier, you thought that when we did the open and affirming process.
I think that was the time, that open and affirming. We had a lot of discussion, pro and con, about that. And finally came up to open it up, that we were truly open-hearted.
Yes, and that took a while, didn't it?
It did.
A couple of years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you were involved in that pretty heavily. You organized events and discussion groups and things?
I saw the importance of it, and I couldn't leave it alone.
And you thought the church was being pretty courageous when we did that?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good, Mom. And then Reverend Sarah says, do you have any words of wisdom for the people in the church now about the future? Is there anything that you hope will be better in the future?
Well, I hope that more people would be coming to the church itself on Sundays, because there certainly is quite a letdown there, and I don't like to think about it going down, but if we worked on it somehow, encourage people to come in some ways, I think we should do it.
Say goodbye to all the people at the church until you see them next time.
Goodbye to all you people at the church.
For the folks who are just walking in, we will show that video again after the postlude. So for folks who just caught the tail end of that video, we will show it again after the postlude.
Good morning. I'm going to read a poem of my grandmother's about faithfulness this morning, but let me first explain something about her life and her faith. My grandmother, Emma Riggs Barnard, was raised by her Congregationalist missionary family in the country of Turkey during the 1880s and 90s. The Riggs family established a multi-generational mission serving and supporting the repressed Armenian population in that country over many decades. My grandmother's faith and her faith inspired me from a very early age because she moved into our home to help my mother raise her 5 children when our father died of a heart attack at the age of 42. May God's faithfulness, as revealed in this poem written by my grandmother, walk with you on your way today. Emmaus. 'Twas in the breaking of the bread, just common daily bread, they knew their Lord. They were so blind, they failed to find him in the baffling, sad events that crushed their world about them. But at the quiet close of day, he walked beside them in the way. And as they sat about that simple board, they knew their Lord. O Master, open thou our eyes, that we, like them, in glad surprise, may see thee in the simple things of every day, and find thee walking with us on our way. Let us rise in spirit and sing of God's faithfulness. New Century Hymnal 423.
Good morning. Just wonderful to be together here in the sanctuary and those joining us online, both regulars and visitors today. It's just a wonderful Sunday to be here. My name is Wayne Simmons. My pronouns are he, his, and him, and I'm the church moderator. And for anyone that's thinking about bolting for the door, I am not going to do the reflection today, so you are all safe. Well, we're here today, in addition to our regular gathering, it's Celebration Sunday. This church was formed 150 years ago here in Longmont, and we're here to celebrate it here today. Yeah! 150 years is a long time. I mean, Don was just a kid back then when the church started. But let's try to put it into a little bit of perspective. So who was president in 1872 when this church was formed? Abraham Lincoln was dead. Ulysses S. Grant. Whoa, we got some smart people here. Factoid, Ulysses' middle name was actually James. So it really was Ulysses J. Grant. But when he went to the military academy at West Point, they put a J in the middle, and the Army said, we're not changing it. So he became Ulysses S. Grant. Other events in 1872, there was a famous invention and patent issued, and that invention is still used today throughout the world. Anyone have an idea what that might be? Radio? No. Sorry? A barbed wire. That was probably earlier. It is contributing to global warming. The internal combustion engine was invented in 1872. So just one more, and Beth, you need to tell us what this one is. One of our favorite hobbies. What happened in 1872 in one of our favorite hobbies? Yes, the first Open Championship was played to crown the golfer of the year in St. Andrews, Scotland. So, long time ago. Well, here today we've got a lot of activities as a part of our celebration and a lot of special guests. We've already met June by video. It was wonderful to hear you, and interesting to hear your perspectives on what things were like so many years ago. We heard the poem by Wayne's grandmother from long ago. We've got Rob's up here with special organ music today. Thank you, Rob, for coming. Wonderful to have you. Our youth is going to participate with us today, and we'll have some special singers, and if the Spirit moves them, Amelia and Sarah may be dancing by the end of the day. So a couple of other things to note. Judy Miller and Dee Dee Ospa made a wonderful exhibit in Fireside Lounge. You got to go see that. It's got articles and pictures from all through the decades. And I think it's just wonderful. So be sure and save some time to go through there. We're going to have live music after the service outside, courtesy of Doug Rasmussen and his band of renown. We'll have snacks, we'll have drinks, and to close it all off, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock today at the Longmont Museum, up on the second floor in the archive, Eric Mason, who is the Longmont historian, has put together some artifacts from even way back into the 1800s or late 1800s about the church. So if you have time, go over to the museum between 1 and 2 and just tell them you're going up to the archive to see the exhibit on the Longmont, UCC Longmont. So lots of great things going on, and it will be a fun day. So, along with our regular worship team, Reverend Sarah, Reverend Amelia, Robert on the keyboard, we've got John up, and I don't know if Phyllis is still up there. Yeah, John and Phyllis are up on the loft, projecting to the world. Randy's on sound. You met Alyssa when you came through the door. I think Addie's back in the nursery. So we're, on behalf of all of us, just welcome for today. And there's a coloring table in the back if we have any kids that want to utilize their hands while the service is going on as well. So now, as we do every Sunday as an open and affirming church, we begin our service by saying that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And now we'll turn over to the youth for our gathering words.
Please join with me in the gathering words. This is the church of my dreams. The church that cares, that heals hurt lives. The church of the people. A working church, a worshiping church, an engaged church. A church for the living God.
And let us rise in spirit and sing hymn number 8 in the New Century Hymnal, Praise to the Living God. It is a joy and a privilege to be with you this morning to celebrate this anniversary. And with every celebration comes an invitation. And this morning, we're inviting you to consider the gift of faithfulness. And to consider that where faithfulness is present, God's Spirit is present. It has been truly a joy to contemplate faithfulness for the past several months. And the song that we're going to sing after the reflections this morning has been a companion. It's been a companion that I have sung along to, and I apologize to Amelia, our walls are very thin. She's heard it many times. Beth has heard it many times in the house. Randy this morning said to me, I can't sing that song without crying. I can't either. Reflecting on faithfulness, on my faithfulness, your faithfulness, our faithfulness, is something that will be considered by future generations, and more immediately by those who are joining this community for the first time or rejoining after a long absence. I came to the conclusion these past months that I want to be remembered for my faithfulness. I'm okay if people say, she was sort of friendly, but she was faithful. Sometimes she moved a little too fast or she interrupted, but she was faithful. To me, that would be high praise. What do you want to be remembered for? And what does UCC Longmont or First Congregational United Church of Christ Longmont want to be remembered for? Our faithfulness to the teachings we practice and the God we praise and proclaim is always in plain sight to those who are looking. Now, I'm not the only one who's been contemplating and pondering faithfulness. Reverend Amelia has as well, and she's going to share some reflections with us.
In the Old Testament, especially the Psalms and some of the prophets, God's faithfulness is often expounded upon as being steadfast love. So in Psalm 31, it says, I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love. Or Psalm 25, all the paths of the Lord are steadfast love and faithfulness for those who keep God's covenants and God's testimonies. I think of this kind of steadfast love as being that sort of steadiness, that calm determination that allows a stream of water to shape its way through a mountain and become a canyon. And it starts maybe as a slow trickle and becomes a larger creek and a river and takes on something like a discernible direction. And it works its way down, doesn't it? And parts of Colorado have these gorgeous canyons. And so we get to see those and be inspired by those when we are driving or rafting or hiking our way through them. And they fill me with that sense of faithfulness, of steadiness that could change the world over time. On a day like today, when we get to join and celebrate God's steadfast love in the life of a community, it's inspiring in the same sort of way. To think of how a dream became a plan, and then maybe it became a committee because everything takes a committee, and then it became a community, and it took on its own shape. And we got to join along with it somewhere along the way. And because we are a part of this community, we know that there were ups and downs, that there were challenges and joys and hard decisions and celebrations. And we arrived here today because of that steadfast love of God's presence. But that steadfast love also is evident in how people responded. Throughout all those generations, they rose up. with their own faithfulness. And for me, I look forward to getting to be continuing to be inspired by their work, but also by the work that we are all doing together. And as we celebrate that today, I hope that that is what takes root, what becomes a trickle in your own soul. That when we see how people partner with God, the landscape changes.
In the landscape where Jesus lived and walked and formed and gathered community upon was one where there were grapevines. And in fact, the cover of your bulletin shows many grapevines. And it makes me think about how risky it is to plant a vineyard. It starts with a piece of land, right? And then some seeds. And it takes up to 3 or 4 years before any fruit is produced. You think about the courage it takes to make that investment of both land and resource, and the vulnerability of the elements that are required for any successful crop. And so the elements of faithfulness that kept coming to me were courage and vulnerability. And in preparation for today, I asked some of the people who had the longest relationship with First Congregational United Church of Christ. So we asked June Thomas when she thought the church was courageous. And she talked about the open and affirming statement. And John Caldwell said the same thing. Some others mentioned the visitors and guests that came through the Lay Clergy Institute and special speakers who came from around the country, and how in their time it was very courageous. I also spent some time, a few minutes, with our young people and asked them about courage. And we started by asking, what is courage? And one of our young people said, it's being brave. And another one said, it's doing things that are a little scary. And so I said, well, do you have examples in your life of when you have done something that took courage? And they had 2 examples. One was moving to another country. And the second person said, trying a front flip. That would be super scary right now. But when I reflected on what our young people had to offer, it occurred to me that metaphorically, this is also exactly what courage and faithfulness and vulnerability is. It's literally true, and it's metaphorically true. Moving to another country, developing a completely way of being and living in the world that might be different from those who are around us. Or allowing yourself to go, as we used to say, head over tea kettle, and being flipped upside down. That is the gospel of Jesus, isn't it? Flipping the script. And so as I pondered our young people's thoughts and experiences and words, it was clear to me that faithfulness is a mix of courage and vulnerability, often in different proportions. And there's so many examples in the life and teachings of Jesus that demonstrate faithfulness and the elements of courage and vulnerability. And where I landed today is in the Gospel of John, a section that's known as the Farewell Discourse. And it covers 4 chapters, chapter 14 to 17. It's a rather lengthy section where Jesus spoke openly and metaphorically about his relationships with God and with the community he was with. And what he wanted to impress upon them was the ways that their relationship would continue even after his death. Said another way, it's a section which outlines a way forward for their particular community and for every community that forms around the teachings and practices of Jesus. It's a way forward for the church that recognizes the concentric circles and the interconnectedness of relationships that do not end. We call it the communion of saints. So all communities that are centered around a commitment to faithfully live in harmony with God's Spirit can receive instruction from these words in John's Gospel. If you're wondering whether or not you're being asked to be faithful, I think the words that June Thomas shared in her video might be helpful. When asked and when considering how long the open and affirming process took, she said, "I thought it was important and I couldn't let it go." Faithfulness doesn't let us go when we think or we know something is important. And it's that same faithfulness of God that doesn't let us go. So let's listen to these words in chapter 15 of John's Gospel. This is Jesus speaking. "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love, in my steadfast love. I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete." We're going to turn now to a special guest, a special message that was prepared for us by the Reverend Dr. Anthony Scott, who's going to talk about faithfulness.
I'm the Reverend Dr. Anthony Scott. It is my privilege to serve as Associate Conference Minister of the Rocky Mountain Conference of the United Church of Christ. And on behalf of the conference, I bring greetings from the 69 congregations of the conference, which are dispersed over 250,000 miles in the state of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. On this day in the life of UCC Longmont, it is a privilege to join with you as you celebrate 150 years of faithful and faith-filled service as a worshiping body, of being the church, ambassadors of the presence of God, the body of Jesus Christ, empowered by the Holy Spirit. 150 years ago, in 1872, a group of women and men resolved to establish a congregation for the worship of God and the stabilization of a brand new community. While I don't know all the obstacles that those now in the great cloud of witnesses endured to preserve and to advance this community of faith, I do know that this church survived the toll of 2 world wars, the Great Flu of 1918, the Great Depression, a destabilizing drought, and the pervasive influence of purveyors of hate, of fear and terror and white supremacy. And why? Why did they do this? Why did they persist in holding together this community? Why were those people insistent that the First Congregational Church of Longmont keep the faith? They couldn't have imagined who you would become. They could not have imagined your radical hospitality, making space for low-income housing on your land. They could not have imagined your bold witness as you welcomed raw tools to beat swords, firearms, tools so often used for violence which leads only to death, into plowshares, tools which might be used in the planting and propagation and harvest of life-giving food. They couldn't have imagined your collective discernment and public declaration that God welcomes all people of any age and gender and race and culture, ability, sexual orientation, and so would you. They couldn't have imagined that you would endure yet another pandemic, that you would stand firm yet again in the face of white supremacist rhetoric, that you would be faithful and faith-filled in the midst of a drought of trust and truth, in an epidemic of angst, anxiety, depression, and grief and fear. I encourage you, beloved, continue in the pattern of faithfulness planted in your foundations. Stir up the gift of God which is in you because of the Holy Spirit. Live faithfully into Jesus' coming out moment, as recorded in the Gospel according to St. Luke. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because God has anointed me. God has set me apart to preach the gospel, the good news to the poor. God has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovery of understanding and compassion to those who refuse to comprehend, to liberate all who are oppressed, to preach the year of Jubilee. I leave you with these words from the one who is faithful and true, the Alpha and Omega, the one who was dead and is alive forevermore, as envisioned by John in exile on the Isle of Patmos. Be faithful until death, and you will receive a crown of life. Amen.
Friends, our choir is going to sing an anthem this morning, and you are invited to join in the refrain if you'd like, as it's printed in your bulletin or as it will appear on your screen.
Happy birthday to us all. 150 years of faithful caretaking in the Longmont community, starting with the homesteaders from Chicago who plotted out the whole of the city before they even moved here. The very first of the Chicago group bought land here in 1870. They came in 1871 and built the first buildings of the town that summer. For us to be exactly 150 years old, it was just the next year those settlers established this church as the First Congregational Church in Longmont. I can't speak to the whole history of this church, but I can speak to what brought us here instead of to the other churches that we looked at in 2003. It was the spirit and long history of generosity of this congregation. The creation of the R Center, the Born to Read program that we were reading every day when we were reading every day to our 2-year-old Jed, the lunches for the students at Longmont High School, PFLAG and the LGBTQ organizations that felt safe in this building, the Lay Clergy Institute that brought experts in for a weekend to speak with personal experience about difficult and important issues, and all the nonprofits who benefited from our home tour. When John and I decided to go with the work groups that went to Biloxi post-Katrina, it opened my eyes to a generosity of heart to those outside our community. It involved giving both a good deal of time and money, but even more than that was the spiritual giving. The living conditions at the camp would have seemed impossible at home, but when we were out there, it felt so easy. And it was quickly apparent that we were there as much to witness the loss and grief of those stricken as we were there to physically rebuild their homes. That was a lesson that stood us in good stead when the 2013 floods happened here. And this church gave not only of its time and money, but also part of this building to house those who would help rebuild. Linda Pettit was moderator at that time, and I was her moderator-elect, so I got to follow her around as she worked with the council of that time to make the decisions needed to lead our whole congregation in the work to help Longmont recover. And I saw everyone around me do everything, from digging the mud out of basements, tearing down what was ruined, to washing down the foundations, from hugging people who just needed it, to carefully drying out precious photographs, to providing childcare for those who had to figure out all the paperwork needed for insurance and government help. As moderator, I got a good close-up view of just how many hours people in this congregation volunteered to do everything from decorating the sanctuary, making coffee, serving communion, ushering, gardening, organizing and serving the post-service snacks, serving on all the committees, organizing the art, teaching classes for adults and children. So much time and so many people who understood what was needed to keep the church going in all its functions, and who understood the rewards of the heart that come from service for others. And I found myself able to put in a lot of hours myself and realize how good it felt to be able to do something in the face of all the problems that haunt me when I watch the news. The core members of this church understand how important they are to the continued work of this church. They're the heart of how we keep the doors open to those in need, how we keep the lights on and our staff paid. They follow the teachings of the Bible and make their resources do the things they want to see happen more often. Everything from giving away more gun safes to helping keep this sacred space for everyone who needs spiritual respite, growth, or healing. Linda Pettit, who was always at the back of the church or in children's church, embodied these values in her everyday actions. When she didn't have the financial resources to help, she gave generously of her time. And in the song the choir just sang, "Find us faithful," there's this line: "After all our hopes and dreams have come and gone, and our children sift through all we've left behind, may the clues that they discover and the memories they uncover become the light that leads into the road we each must find." Now, she's gone and laid to rest in our memorial garden, but she's given us all one last gift, $10,000 in her will. Her gift is one that will go on giving, supporting everyone in this community to find the road that we each must find. Thank you, Linda, and to all of you who so generously pour out what's needed to continue the good work that's been a century and a half in the making.
which art in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
All right. Well, good morning. My name is Stephanie Dean, and my pronouns are she and her, and I serve on our church council, and it's so wonderful to be here with everyone this morning celebrating our 150th birthday. Yay. So here are the announcements for this week. I want to give a very special welcome this morning to our visitors and guests, and welcome back to those of you who maybe haven't been here for a while. It's nice to see your faces again. There are clipboards on the back table back here for name tags, as well as if you'd like to sign up for the weekly email newsletter. If you're joining us online, there's an electronic version of these on the website. This morning, our celebration will continue after worship. We will be outside for a reception with some music and snacks, so please plan to stay and peruse the lay clergy and home tour that's available in the Fireside area and fellowship in the courtyard. Thank you to all of you who have participated in our pastoral relations feedback loop. Please look for the feedback loop in the Mission Possible and Happenings if you haven't already had a chance to fill that out. Also, please be sure to check the bulletin for up-to-date information. And for those of you viewing online, the bulletin is also available on the church website. If you'd like to support UCC Longmont financially, you can give online at ucclongmont.org/giving, or use the offering boxes, which are right back there, kind of between the doors where you come in, on the wall of the sanctuary. We are so grateful for all of your gifts. And lastly, we are just looking forward to connecting with you and the community. And if you're looking for ways to connect with us, you can check out our website or Facebook page. So we are excited to celebrate the faithfulness that's been kind of celebrated this morning already for the past 150 years, and invite you into the next season of what UCC Longmont looks like. So thank you.
Friends, let's rise in spirit and sing these words of assurance and blessing that were first written to a church in Philippi and are now written to us as well. Number 200 in the sing hymnal, or as it appears on your screen. Friends, what we're celebrating today began before time was measured. There is joy in sharing in the work of creating a community and world where love and mercy transform lives, where peace and nonviolence are practiced, where justice liberates and restores. God is the one who began this work, and God will see it to completion.
And so we know that what we celebrate today will continue for years to come. There is hope in knowing that we are united with others in God's work, both here in Longmont and beyond. May we be encouraged and empowered for what is to come, trusting that God will see this work through to completion.
And friends, And we're going to continue our singing with Grateful number 143 in the sing hymnal.
say hello to people at the church?
Hello to people at Longmont Church.
Okay. You want to say hello to people at the church?
Hello to people at Longmont Church.
Yeah, this is June Thomas, 100 and a half or a little more than that years old, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Reverend Sarah's asked you a couple of questions. So the first one is, what are your favorite moments that you remember at Longmont UCC?
It must be the singing in the choir. I always loved that so much.
Was there any particular choir director or piece of music or any particular concert or anything that you remember that you liked?
I don't think so.
No. So another question that Sarah had was, were there moments when you thought the church was courageous? And when we talked earlier, you thought that when we did the open and affirming process.
I think that was the time, that open and affirming. We had a lot of discussion, pro and con, about that. And finally came up to open it up, that we were truly open-hearted.
Yes, and that took a while, didn't it?
It did.
A couple of years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you were involved in that pretty heavily. You organized events and discussion groups and things?
I saw the importance of it, and I couldn't leave it alone.
And you thought the church was being pretty courageous when we did that?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good, Mom. And then Reverend Sarah says, do you have any words of wisdom for the people in the church now about the future? Is there anything that you hope will be better in the future?
Well, I hope that more people would be coming to the church itself on Sundays, because there certainly is quite a letdown there, and I don't like to think about it going down, but if we worked on it somehow, encourage people to come in some ways, I think we should do it.
Say goodbye to all the people at the church until you see them next time.
Goodbye to all you people at the church.